Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to serve as the host in introducing a person who I find so charming and so fascinating in regard to not only his work but his very being. I only have one criticism of our speaker, George Meek, and that is that his book, After We Die, What Then, wasn't available to me when I was a college student in the 1940s. Otherwise, I might not have been so obnoxious with my teachers and fellow students in asking dumb questions about life and death and what happens after death and so forth. If you have not yet had an opportunity to read it, I encourage you to do so because I think it answers so many questions and points the way to the process that apparently we are on in this life. As Joseph Campbell said, life is a joyous participation in the world of sorrows. And some people like to emphasize the downside, and some people like to emphasize the upside. And of course, I think that the work that George Meek has done helps us to recognize the combination. During his first career, he served as a research and management consultant, and his European clients paid him to make 44 transatlantic trips over a period of 19 years to organize and supervise research in their laboratories. And he himself made inventions his clients patented in 10 countries. At age 60, he terminated his first career and embarked on a self-financed worldwide interdisciplinary research program into the basic nature of humankind, man. Within 8 years, he and his 10 professional colleagues had created the book Healers and the Healing Process. In 1982, through the use of what they called the Spiricom, the technical inventions for communication with entities of the world. He and his colleague were the first persons to have had more than 20 hours of two-way conversations with the so-called dead, an American scientist, Dr. George Jeffreys Mueller, who had been buried 14 years earlier. I think that the scriptural statement, the meek shall inherit the earth, perhaps might apply for George, although he's so modest he might not reveal what I think he really is hoping for, and that is to inherit the heavens. Today, 21 years into his second career, George Meek will speak on the continuity of human consciousness. George?
Thank you, Leo, and thank all of you for coming, giving me this opportunity to share the 21 years of research which Leo referred to. Can everybody hear me in the rear of the room? Okay. I want to open with a little joke that is particularly appropriate to the subject matter I will share with you today. A motorist paused as he entered a town and inquired the directions to the town hall. The motorist explained. He says, "Tonight I will deliver a lecture entitled How to Get to Heaven. Would you like to come?" The immediate answer was, "Oh no, you don't even know how to get to the town hall." Well, that little story is good for a laugh. It is very appropriate for my presentation this afternoon. 2,000 years ago, Jesus talked about the kingdom of heaven. He used poetic language when he referred to his Father's house of many mansions. This afternoon in and I stress the word this afternoon in semi-scientific language, I will tell you where the mansions are, of what they are constructed, who lives in which mansions, and in fact give you some idea as to which mansion you yourself are heading for. A tall order indeed. Heading for age 82, I have a tendency to ramble, so I will follow closely my prepared text. More has happened in the last 30 years to document survival of human consciousness than in 8,000 years of recorded history. I want to acquaint you with some of the astonishing research results whereby scientific equipment has been used to converse with persons who died 25, 50, 100 or more years ago. I will share with you examples of both computer and prolonged mental telepathy contacts with Jeanette, who is my beloved wife for 55 years, and my co-worker for the last 30 years. And I will show you why and how your very own mind, memory banks, personality, and soul will continue to function after you someday cast off that physical body in which you are presently encased. I will show you how you can have a happy forever. I will address three crucial questions: how, what, where. First, how is survival of your individual mind, memory banks, personality, and soul possible? Second, what evidence is there for survival of your individual consciousness? And third, where will you as an individual find yourself after you go through the door marked death? So let's address that first question. How is survival of your individual mind, memory banks, personality, and soul possible? To answer this first question, I will summarize what our 21 years of worldwide research have revealed about the basic nature of man. I will throw a lot of information at you in the form of slides. Since time will not allow detailed discussion of each slide, I have produced a complimentary packet of materials which you can refer to later at your leisure. Just for my own information, how many did not get one, at least one copy per couple? Are there any individuals here who will not have access to those? I think I brought 325, and I think it compares pretty close to the audience we have today. All right. So let's start with this information I said I wanted to share with you. You will not, you people in the back, particularly over in this far side, will not be able to read most of the detailed wording on there, but I will try to cover in my text what is in the wording on the slide. Individual man is both physical and non-physical. Each of us has our own well-known physical body, but we also have a non-physical body, and that body is in quotes. Occupying the same space as our physical body, this non-physical body is generally called the etheric or bioplasmic body. The bioplasmic body is non-physical and consists of a complex of energy fields. A complex of energy fields, one for each of our bodily organs and components. Some of you may ask, well, what is an energy field? This slide shows the normally invisible energy fields that surround a compass needle and around a leaf. Here we see the normally invisible energy fields around a bar magnet. Notice how intricate and complex the field is. Now, this normally invisible field can easily penetrate flesh and blood and bones, as shown in this slide. Here, the energy field of an electromagnet easily passes through the physical flesh and bone of my hand and organizes thousands of small particles of iron, holding them together in spite of the force of gravity. In the same manner, the invisible energy fields of your etheric or bioplasmic body organize more than 60 billion cells in your physical body structure, just as the field at the one pole of the electromagnet organized the iron filings. To create the fields of the etheric or bioplasmic body, cosmic energy flows in the acupuncture meridians and through the nadis of what is called the chakra system, similar to the energy via the flow of blood in the physical body. But now for the first exciting news. The brain is not the mind. The brain is largely physical matter, while the mind is non-physical, a bundle of energy fields. It helps if we understand that the brain serves as a computer infinitely more complex and advanced than any computer yet conceived of by man. But we have learned that no computer is of value without a programmer. That is, some intelligence quite separate from the computer hardware. And this is where the non-physical and normally invisible mind comes in. It serves as a programmer for the computer-like brain. This invisible complex of energy, of non-physical energy fields is nicely assembled in a package, which we call the astral body, mental body, or what St. Paul 2,000 years ago called the spiritual body. It consists of our subconscious, conscious, and superconscious minds, and what is our most precious possession, our very own individual soul. These mind fields and soul are connected to the computer through an invisible cord called the silver cord. That was referred to in Ecclesiastes some 4,000 years ago, so that's not new. Today we hear about people going out of the body or doing astral travel. This non-physical, so-called silver cord keeps us attached to our computer-like brain, even though our astral body may travel many miles away on a trip. But if this connecting cord breaks for any reason, such as accidental or natural death, the computer, the brain, becomes a piece of junk, and the physical body immediately starts to die, to disintegrate. It decays and becomes disorganized, just as did those iron filings when the electric current was turned off. But equally exciting is the evidence that the astral body, with its levels of mind, its personality, its many its memory banks and soul are all still vibrantly alive after the death and decay of the brain. They move on to other levels of existence, which we will be discussing shortly. In 1981, William O'Neill and I had more than 20 hours of two-way voice communication with the American scientist, Dr. George Jeffries Mueller. When we asked Dr. Mueller via electronic equipment, we learned that he had died and been buried 14 years earlier. And incidentally, he even told us where the small town was in California where we could go and get a copy of his death certificate. Yet it was Dr. Mueller's astral body with which we were talking. His superb mind, memory banks, personality, and soul were just as alive as when he had been directing a large staff of scientists in the U.S. space program. Let me pause to anticipate and answer the question. Meek, were you in fact communicating with Dr. Mueller, who had lived and died 14 years earlier? Or did you fake that tape? In answer, I make this statement. In 1982, the greatest complex of communication laboratories in the world spent 4 months using their sophisticated voice analysis and synthesis equipment while studying our audio tape. Their conclusion was, quotes, you and O'Neill did not possess the knowledge, the financial resources, and the equipment to create such recordings. Hence, we indicate our high esteem of your work by offering you free of charge the privilege of tapping the knowledge and experience of our more than 10,000 scientists, engineers, and technicians, end quotes. This concept enables us to begin to understand the very complex process by which telepathic channeling works. The person who wishes to serve as a channel for a non-physical intelligence, in effect, uses his or her personal processes of mental and spiritual attunement, which in effect says, okay, I will temporarily and partially turn off my mind. Then you can take a turn at being the programmer and use my computer, my brain, to bring your messages through me. My brain will operate my vocal cords to speak the words, or move my fingers to operate the typewriter, or operate the computer keys, or use my fingers to hold a pen to write and put your thoughts on paper. When you have finished your communication, I will throw the switch and, in effect, fully reconnect my own silver cord. This understanding about the continuing life of the astral body also provides a sound basis for comprehending the subject of possession. In some cases, after death, the astral body will stay close to the surface of the planet Earth and make an attempt to get back into the body of a living person. Such an action can cause great mental confusion to the rightful occupant of the physical body. A case of 2 or even 3 or more intelligences fighting to program the same computer. It has been estimated by our communicators in the higher realms that perhaps 20%, and this is the minimum, perhaps 20% of all persons now in mental hospitals the world over, and 20% of all of the criminals now in all of the world's penitentiaries are the victims of just such a possession as is diagrammed in this slide. Now, some of you may think that this idea of the astral body serving as a programmer is just theoretical and has no basis in fact. Allow me to present at least some evidence to the contrary. In 1978, I photographed my own astral body. I turned off the normal illumination and used certain wavelengths of ultraviolet light and an 18A filter with black light fluorescent tubes. Here is the projection of my astral body to your lower left. You'll see this more clearly in a subsequent slide. This happens to be a black and white print. The slide is in color. Here is the projection before I leave that, I want to note that when my astral body was projected, my physical body became transparent. Some of you to my left, close enough, you can see through my body, and you can see the back of the chair as the camera looks through 8 inches of flesh, blood, and bones to the chair back. My body is, in fact, transparent when using these wavelengths of light. And some of you up close might note the light activity at my crown chakra. It just barely catches up at the top of the film there. Directly over my crown chakra, there was a little light that was captured. Later I will show you how this effect was reproduced at my wife's funeral while she lay in the closed casket. In this photo, you see a more complete view of the energy field complex, which was the projection of my astral body. 50 years earlier, Dr. Walter Russell, in his book, The Secret of Light, said, quotes, "The mind is light. The mind is a white light centering source from which projects 2 parallel streams of energy which are cyclical in nature." Here in my own astral body photo, you can note at the lower right 2 streams of energy projecting from the right and left hemispheres of my mind. Note that they are indeed cyclical, and that cyclical aspect will be shown better in another slide. Note that there are indeed they are indeed cyclical in nature, as Dr. Russell clairvoyantly saw and reported 50 years earlier. Science demands replication. Well, here is a second projection of my mind fields, this time complete with a silver cord. Some of you can see starting down near the bottom center of the picture. But note that again, you can see that one of my legs is transparent, and you can see and count the upholstery tacks that are behind my leg. Now let's compare the photo of my astral body. I showed on the preceding slide with a diagram I made 2 years before I obtained that photograph. The concepts are surprisingly similar. And in this quote, note Dr. Russell's 2 cyclical streams projecting from the mind fields. Now, if you think this is all very theoretical, permit me to share these 2 slides of my personal research, which utilize this knowledge of the profound capabilities of the non-physical human mind and its ability to use thought creatively or destructively. Here I projected my thoughts via those 2 light beams from my mind. I projected them into the water, which was used on the radishes of 3 adjacent small clear plastic greenhouses. Those radishes which got water into which I had projected negative thoughts, the radishes at the top, did not grow as well and did not develop as much leaf structure as the radishes at the bottom, into which I had projected positive thoughts. In both cases, I deposited my thought energy into the water, which was daily poured on the radishes by another person. I never saw the radishes during their growing period. And just a quick glance tells you the difference between the leaf structure as well as the radish structure. An additional experiment, I think that sign says 1974, let's say 15 years ago, in this is a picture in which I projected my mind fields into growing plants with even more dramatic results. At the time of planting, I encouraged one row of 18 gladiolus bulbs to grow and produce lovely flowers. I might add another note, an editorial note. I purchased 100 gladiolus bulbs. I had somebody else pick out the 36 bulbs that seemed most closely matched. And in one row of 18 bulbs, I encouraged them to grow and to produce lovely flowers. Over the period of weeks and months ahead, 17 of the 18 bulbs eventually produced beautiful flowers. The adjacent row of 28 bulbs, only 30 inches away, and I might say that all of the dirt was dug up for quite a distance around and mixed together, so we had identical soil in each of the two rows. The adjacent row of 18 bulbs, only 30 inches away, received and followed my negative mental, emotional programming to not produce any buds whatsoever. They obeyed. Not even one of the 18 bulbs formed a flower bud. And down at your lower right, I added a little diagram there, which depicts the two energy beams from my mind interacting with the mind field of the bulbs. I give just one additional example of the reality of projected thought. And my colleague, Dr. Will Thorner, spent 15 years developing an instrument which could be triggered by thought at a distance. This device, in his laboratory on the English Channel, was activated by Dr. Thorner's thought when he was 140 miles away in Ireland. With the help of this information in these 19 slides, we have answered our how question. You can now more easily comprehend that the mind, memory banks, personality, and soul are not physical, how they transcend time and space, and how they survive death of the physical body. Now let us consider this second question. What evidence is there for the survival of individual consciousness? The libraries in England, Brazil, and USA contain many, many thousands of volumes relating to mediumistic or channeled information from the worlds of spirit. The remarks I will now make result from my own sampling of such books and my unique opportunity for these 21 years of personal contact with the dwellers of the spirit worlds through the channeling capability of these people. For each of 11 years, I went to England to work with Bertha Harris, one of England's greatest 20th century channels. I took her on a lecture tour across the USA in 1973. For 20 years, I have worked with Sarah Hieronymus. She channeled a book dictated by a team of 25 of the great authors during the preceding 25 years. She also channeled for Dr. William Francis Gray Swan, a British-American scientist who had assembled in the spirit world a team of approximately 400 scientists and technicians to work with us on an electronic communications equipment project for communicating with the spirit world. Bill O'Neill was highly clairvoyant and clairaudient. He telepathically conversed with Dr. Mueller for 2 years while Dr. Mueller helped to develop the electronic equipment on which we then had more than 20 hours of two-way conversation with him in 1981. This woman, in 4 years, channeled via the word processor more than 3,000 pages of material from dozens of famous people before the channeling became defective due to the impingement of the dark forces. There's no place in this lecture to talk about the reality of the dark forces, but believe me, I could curl your hair if it's not already curled. I repeat that 3,000 pages of material from dozens of famous people before the channeling became defective due to the impingement of the dark forces. It was with deep regret that I decided to destroy all of the thousands of pages so as not to mislead other researchers. Lucille McNames has, for the past 23 years, channeled for extraterrestrial dwellers on other planets, members of spacecraft crews, and my personal scientist friends in spirit, Dr. Mueller, Dr. Swan, and Dr. Walter Russell. Leslie Flint of London, England, has for 42 years been perhaps the world's most famous direct voice medium, not using mental telepathy. We have several hundred transmissions with Leslie Flint in our tape library, and since I'm sure that the great majority of you do not know, have not had contact with the subject of direct voice, in this strange situation, which has only been reported in very few times in the last 90 years, the channel, or I shouldn't say a channel, because one of the distinctive things is that the mind, memory banks, and personality of the person who is making the activity possible does not enter into the process at all. He can be thinking about other things. He can even enter into conversation with the voice which is appearing in the room. And that voice comes into manifestation because the dwellers in the spirit world took from Leslie's body the material we call ectoplasm and formed in space out away from his body what generally is called the voice box. It's best if you just envision a membrane, a tight rubber membrane there that can be vibrated, and the spirit who wants to talk is instructed to stand up and try to remember all the processes that he went through when he stood before a microphone and spoke. And after a little practice, the spirit communicator gets so he's comfortable, his voice comes through, and it's just like the voice that spirit had in his lifetime, and is heard by everybody in the room. No matter, it's not any question of getting up close to it and hearing it. The voice comes out full volume all over the room. It's a truly astonishing method of communication. I know of only two such people other than Leslie. Leslie's now very elderly and in poor health. But there are two people who are coming along that will, I hope, replace him. So it was with this background of my research with these 7 and many other persons that I expressed these 5 personal observations about other world communicators. First one, where are the spirit worlds? They extend from this very room, where there are undoubtedly hundreds of spirit beings listening to this talk. say that in part because I've been told of some advanced publicity on the other side to tune in to this meeting. As I say, from listening to talk to the farthest reaches of space, the lowest three ranges are referred to usually as astral levels. Let me say it right offhand that there is no worldwide agreement on a terminology for the various planes or levels that are used to try to describe the spirit world. So if you find disagreement with some term I use, fine. It may be that you've got the right one and I've got the wrong one. The lowest three ranges are referred to as the astral levels, then the mental and causal planes, and on out into the cosmos. I should say, then the mental and causal planes, followed by the celestial planes, and then on out to other planes into the far reaches of the cosmos. But instead of imagining these spirit realms as layers or zones or planes, it's much more realistic and more scientific to try to visualize them as different frequencies or wavelengths, just as hundreds of invisible radio and TV signals are zapping through this room at this moment. In that case, for those wavelengths, you need a little gadget usually called a radio to tune into those wavelengths. The diagram on the yellow sheet, it's enclosed in your packet, may help the more I won't say studious, the more knowing persons to equate to these comments a little bit in more detail. Now the second question. What categories of consciousness are involved? I'll read slowly there. Nature spirits, human line of evolution, non-human beings, angelic beings, celestial beings, dwellers on other planets, UFO crew members, intergalactic beings. Third, which of these 8 levels of intelligence have been encountered by telepathic channeling? My answer is that all of them, from nature spirits to intergalactic beings who reside, who create individual worlds and solar systems. Fourth, do space or time pose any barriers to instrumental communication or telepathic channeling? No. The spirit worlds, I got to think of out of sequence just a moment. Okay. The spirit worlds are timeless, and serial time does not exist. Space is no barrier. Recently, my friend, Mrs. McNames, whose picture you saw, typed out a letter for a new book as rapidly as she telepathically heard the words. The words were dictated by a scientist on the star Alioth, located in a heavenly constellation known as Ursa Major, popularly called the Big Dipper. This star is so distant that if the message had come at the speed of light, it would have traveled at 660 million miles per hour, 24 hours a day, for 80 years. Science has no explanation of how this is possible. Third item, of what material or substances do these interpenetrating spirit worlds consist? Again, science has no answer to this question. In our present state of ignorance, we can only say that it consists of what has been traditionally called ether. In our chart on the basic nature of man, we refer to it as a sea of consciousness. This does not permit time does not permit a detailed answer. And as I said, I have given each of you a copy of this chart. It deserves your careful study. There again, remember, we do not say that this is just exactly the way it is. This represents our state of ignorance at the present time, and the object of presenting this material is strictly for the purpose of challenging you to pick up from this point and carry the research forward. Incidentally, current research has shown that this sea of consciousness can be tapped by devices which will, in the 21st century, provide limitless amounts of usable energy at any spot on the Earth, with none of the problems of fossil fuels. And in this case, the fuel itself will be free of cost, except for the machinery needed to tap the energy. The first global conference on these so-called free energy devices took place in Switzerland 2 years ago. And if you think it's theoretical, I have the pictures, the diagrams of a machine that is now run for 36 months in Switzerland, putting out a little over 1 kilowatt. It's run 24 hours a day, and there has been no energy of any input of any kind except the initial energy to get a wheel running. A wheel is about 30 inches in diameter. And within recent months, my colleagues have told me that they have gone way up in size, and the machine, this new machine, working the same way, with taking no energy input from man, is developing 10 kilowatts. Now let us resume our survey of evidence for survival of human consciousness. I held a press conference in the ballroom of the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. on Good Friday morning, April 1982, to announce to the media our successful logging of more than 20 hours of communications with Dr. Mueller that I told you about earlier. Then Jeanette and I took our 5th trip around the world and disseminated the news worldwide. Our goal was merely to stimulate further worldwide research by younger persons who were more qualified for such research than we were. And as an aside, I might mention that those of you who have studied the subject of inventions know that for a really radical step forward, on the average, it takes not less than 1 generation to comprehend really what is going on. And this work that we have been doing, that we started with Dr. Mueller, certainly is no exception. But that effort has paid off handsomely already. Now, 10 years later, researchers are contacting the so-called dead via radio-like devices, video screens, telephone answering machines, and computers. In England, Ken Wilber has used several computers to talk with intelligences which use 15th and 16th century England. Serious research indicates the validity of these communications. In Germany, there are now several hundred members in organizations researching what is called the electronic voice phenomenon, EVP. I might make a little aside there that term, electronic voice phenomenon, was chosen by the earlier researchers because if they said they were talking with the dead, they would get a good horse laugh. So this was technically correct, but it wasn't something that raised a red flag 10 years ago. The term has been shortened to EVP since that time. There are several researchers in Germany who have had prominent success with video screens, radio-like devices, computers, and telephone answering machines. In Luxembourg, a husband and wife team has had the most spectacular results. Currently, they have almost daily use of the telephone answering machine for contacts with a woman scientist who says that she is from a parallel universe. And I think she's presented some pretty good evidence to that effect. With her help from the other side, we've had phenomenal success with the computer and video contact, although the video contact is still very sporadic, very, very uncertain. Contacts with persons who have made their transition during the last 20 to 100 or more years. When I was in Luxembourg in 1990, my 65th trip to Europe, I was hoping that Jeanette, my wife for 55 years, would communicate. She had made the transition to the spirit worlds 90 days earlier, April 25th, 1990. The president of the Swiss Parapsychology Association and I worked furiously Saturday and Sunday, helping to make some modifications in the a new apparatus, and did not have time for any personal research. However, at the very end of the Saturday afternoon, when the computer was printing out the summary of our weekend collaboration with residents of the spirit world, the unexpected happened. The computer stopped, but it had finished its task. But then it started again, indexed itself back to the lower left-hand corner and printed out, "Hello, sweetheart, Jeanette." Weeks later, via mental telepathy, she confirmed her presence in the Luxembourg during that hectic weekend. Now I'd like to share with you an even more dramatic example of computer contact with Jeanette through Luxembourg, a contact which was followed within hours in the USA by a confirming telepathic contact with Jeanette through her former nurse, a nurse called Lori. On February 20, 1981, I sat at my desk holding the Luxembourg correspondence file in my hand as I prepared to write my friends in Luxembourg to ask if there was any news from Jeanette. The telephone rang. It was a call from my colleagues, Jules and Maggie, whose picture I just showed you. With great excitement, they reported they had just received, via computer, a message in German addressed to them on a topic that I had no interest. This was followed by a letter message in English from Jeanette to me. The computer printout had no spaces between the words. And I will read what was printed on that on the computer that day. Dear GW, well, it seems that there are still people who do not believe the contacts your friends here in Luxembourg are having. Hence, I will give you some personal details known only to you and to Molly. Molly has served as my secretary and worked with Jeanette during this time for the past 9 years. Give Molly my warmest greetings. I miss her. Nobody can know how much. First story. In 1987, end of April, our tenant Debbie called to say her refrigerator was off. Must have been on a Thursday morning and had no connection with the storm the day before. At the close of her workday, she called again to say that she was having more trouble. This time she had left her purse on the seat of the car of the lady with whom she had been riding. This lady lived outside, far outside of Franklin, so Debbie asked to borrow our key to her place. Second story. On April 29, 1987, Anne Valentine wrote a letter from California suggesting that she had not received the, quote, Magic of Living Forever booklets such as you got in your packet. Booklets that she had ordered, but instead the box contained Harlequin novels. Third story. John Lathrop shut off the electricity at our rental house to put in a new yard light. He wasn't down there very long, but he charged $20 service and additional $40 for the bulbs, plus tax. The charge seemed high, and I might explain to my dear wife, is of Scottish descent. Her name is Mary Jeanette Duncan. I was thankful many times for the frugality that she used all through life. So that was completely in keeping with Jeanette's makeup. She says, "Don't try to explain this, honey. My never-ending love to you. I miss you so much, but I know we will be together. I have a big job to do here as a result of that idiot's war. Love forever, JDM." And a little aside, there's what's going on. I say that Jeanette at that time was serving as a guardian angel of love and kindness, receiving men, women, and children of the Mideast War as they came out of the discharge end of the tunnel. And she said, in far larger numbers than you're learning about through the news media. And we later did have confirmation that there were probably more than 100,000 men, women, children, and killed in addition to the Iraqi troops. Jeanette then addressed Maggie. She says, "Please, Maggie, forward this to George. He can be a great help to you all. Send my best wishes to Lori. Also, thank you. Jeanette Duncan Meek." Well, I knew examples 1 and 3 were totally factual, but I was at a loss as to number 2, relating to the equipment, to the shipment of books to California. He wants me to finish up in 5 minutes. I had carefully timed this. I must be speaking too slowly. I got to carefully time it. I know it takes 48 and a half minutes. And I was told that I had that much time. Okay, so I've got to pick out now some things that in the closing months of Jeanette's last earth life, she was paralyzed. She could not see or hear, and had to be fed 1 spoon of soft food at a time. That's the nurse and Jeanette. She joked about, and she was reporting what had happened in the early weeks, and she said, well, she had tried to go through the tunnel 3 times, and each time she came back. And when I was kidding her about it, she said, "Well, honey, I just didn't want to leave you and Lori." Incidentally, Hieronymus Bosch painted this picture of going through the tunnel 500 years before Moody, Kubler-Ross, and others got interested in that subject. Within 7 weeks after passing, Jeanette and I got in contact through Lori and another one of the channels whose picture was in my earlier part of my talk. She arrived on the middle astral plane, but within a few months had graduated to the mental plane. At that point, she shed her astral body and continued functioning in what is traditionally called the mental body. For months, she helped me to channel the first book that we'd agreed before she went over that we would collaborate on 1 or 2 books. And I worked on the book, which is tentatively titled "Enjoy Your Own Funeral and Live a Happy Forever." But I assure you that's a continued story you'll hear more about. And in our first book, we reported on the special birthday and graduation party which Jeanette and I had staged in place of the traditional funeral service. After the audience left the funeral chapel, I set up my lighting equipment while her body was there in a sealed casket. We took pictures. I think there are 18 of them there, if I'm not mistaken, 18, 19. We took them every minute and a half. Only one of them showed any paranormal effects. This one was a mind bender. You see me standing there with my left hand on the casket. The upper part of my torso has completely disappeared, and you can see the intricate designs of the wallpaper out of sight behind my body. And you can see much that's on the tote board that was completely out of sight. Later I had occasion to discuss with her telepathically what was going on, and she gave me some very information which Leo tells me I can't share with you. So I'll finish in the 2 minutes now. I must give you this information. You have a copy of this chart that you can study at home about some descriptions of the various planes. Incidentally, there was one interesting thing. One time when Jeanette and I were talking, she said, "Honey, will you get a copy of that big colored chart that you made?" And so I procured a copy, and I said, "Okay, what's involved?" She said, "Start at the bottom of it and read it word for word." So I did that and followed it up to the cosmic plane. And her answer was, "Well, honey, I don't know where you got that information, but it seems all right to me." Now, on this question of where you will be going, each of us, after a period of rest and recuperation, usually finds ourselves on one of 3 levels of existence. These levels, as I say, are lowest astral, middle astral, and highest astral. Since I do not know you individually, I cannot tell you on which plane you will find yourself. However, this diagram gives you the first clue. And there I have 3 arrows labeled A, B, and C. And those can compare with the details given on the big colored chart that you have. C is the lowest astral. The middle one, B, the fat one, is described as average, kind-hearted, considerate, well-meaning. hard-working adults and all infants and children will arrive on the middle astral. A is individuals who have made more than average spiritual progress in this or other past lives and whose souls have evolved to a point where they just naturally are living their present lives in harmony with the characteristics depicted on that chart. And I say if you want to increase your chances of being in Group A, and incidentally the width of the arrow is just a rough approximation that we've been given from the other side as to the percentage of people falling in each of those categories. If you want to increase your own chances of being in Group A and arrive on the highest astral, you should start now to follow the time-proven pathway to a happy forever. And that, which is detailed in the book. Seek first the consciousness of God, the Creator. Learn to know and love your real self. Love others, show compassion, radiate kindness, practice patience, share with others, continue to grow mentally and spiritually, and serve others. In the case of Jeanette, I can report that the little scamp really scampered up the thing. Within 11 and a half months, she moved up to a very happy situation on the celestial plane. So now you have at least a partial answer to question number 3. Where will I as an individual find myself after I go through the door marked death and new beginnings? When you later, in case you're getting worried, Leo, just about a minute and a half. When you later study the materials that I've given you, you can then decide on which plane you want to function after you shed your physical body. For those who can't read the wording, it says ticket. Ticket to a happy forever. Admit 1. Next performance. And notice the logo. There is no physical body. That is left behind. Only mind, memory banks, personality, and soul will be admitted. It would perhaps be wise to start now to make some time payments towards the purchase of your ticket. You can be sure the seat will be reserved for you. However, you need to decide now, before you cast off your physical body, how much you are willing to pay for your ticket. So if you think you will wait till you get to the pearly gate, sorry, that's too late. Do you want your spirit world reservation in section A, B, or C? Remember, no one can avoid making a choice. However, Jeanette and I are happy in the knowledge that it is within the power of each of you to live a happy forever. Thank you.
George Meek presented this lecture October 26th in Fort Collins, Colorado. Later that evening at the keynote banquet, George was awarded the 1991 Franklin Lohr Memorial Award for his outstanding research in the field of paranormal phenomena.